How my dream wedding turned into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse where the man I loved traded me to a total stranger for a clean slate. The lace on my dress was still itching my collarbone when the limo pulled up to Terminal 4. You know that feeling? That absolute dizzying peak of happiness where you think, okay, this is it. This is where my life actually begins. I was 24, wearing a diamond that caught every flicker of the fluorescent airport lights, and holding the hand of Caleb, the man I'd promised my soul to just 4 hours earlier. The wedding had been perfect. A blur of white peonies, expensive champagne, and the kind of vows that make grown men cry in the back row. Caleb looked at me, leaned in close. So close I could smell the expensive cedarwood cologne I'd bought him for the rehearsal dinner. And he whispered, "Go ahead to the gate, Mia. I have to take care of one tiny thing with the luggage. A little surprise for the flight. It'll be right behind you." I laughed. I actually laughed. I told him not to be long because the Maldives didn't want to wait for us. He kissed my forehead. It felt cold, looking back, like marble, and he pushed me gently toward the security line. I walked away, spinning my new wedding band around my finger, thinking about the 10 days of sun and sand ahead of us. I didn't look back. I wish I had, just once, to see the expression on his face as he watched his beloved walk into a trap. I waited at gate B12, clutching 2 first-class tickets and a passport that still felt weirdly light in my hand. 10 minutes passed. 20. The airport was a hum of activity, people rushing to reach families, businessmen barking into Bluetooth headsets. But Caleb wasn't there. The boarding call for Group 1 echoed through the terminal. I pulled out my phone. Nothing. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. That generic robotic voice that says, "The subscriber you are trying to reach is unavailable." My heart started doing this slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Thump. Thump. Maybe he got held up at TSA? Maybe there was an issue with the bags? I stood up, scanning the crowd for that familiar tall frame, the sandy hair, the confident stride, but all I saw was a sea of strangers. "Excuse me, ma'am?" I looked up. A man was sitting in the seat right across from me. He hadn't been there a moment ago. He wasn't Caleb. He was older, maybe mid-40s, wearing a sharp charcoal suit that cost more than my entire wedding. He had these eyes, flat, like gray stones under a river, eyes that had seen things I couldn't even imagine. "You're Mia, right? Mia Thorne? Or I suppose it's Mia Vance now," he asked. His voice was smooth. Too smooth, like silk over a razor blade. I blinked, pulling my silk wrap tighter around my shoulders. "I'm sorry. Do I know you? I'm waiting for my husband." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't hand it to me. He slid it across the plastic airport seat. My breath hitched. It was Caleb's wedding band. The white gold band I had slid onto his finger just hours ago. There was a tiny scratch on the side from where he'd bumped it against the limo door. It was his. "Caleb isn't coming," the stranger said. He checked his watch. A heavy, gold piece of machinery that looked like it could anchor a ship. In fact, Caleb doesn't exist anymore. That name was a convenience. A costume. But the flight is boarding. And I've paid a very high price for your company, Mia. It would be a shame to waste those tickets. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went numb. "What are you talking about? Who are you? Where is my husband?" "We're going to board this plane now, Mia," he said, standing up. He was tall, imposing. He didn't touch me, but the way he stood, it was a threat. "If you make a scene, they'll have to show you the documents your husband signed. Documents that give me legal guardianship over your estate, and by extension, your person. He sold you, Mia. Now, let's not miss our flight." The air in the first-class cabin felt thick. You ever feel like the oxygen is being sucked out of the room by a vacuum? That was me. I was sitting in seat 2A, and the stranger, who told me to call him Julian, was in 2B. I was trembling so hard I couldn't even hold the glass of champagne the flight attendant offered. I kept looking at the cabin door, waiting for Caleb to burst in, breathless, telling me this was some sick, elaborate joke. I imagined him laughing, saying, "Gotcha! This is Julian. He's a family friend." But the door hissed shut. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration. The engine started to hum, a low, vibrating growl that felt like it was rattling my very teeth. "Where is he?" I hissed, leaning toward Julian once the plane began to taxi. "What did you do to him? Did you kidnap him? They'll give you whatever you want. My inheritance. The house. Just tell me he's okay." Julian didn't even look up from his tablet. He was scrolling through stock market tickers, his face an unreadable mask. "I didn't do anything to him, Mia. Your husband is a very talented man, a bit too talented for his own good. He spent the last 3 years building a life out of stolen identities and bad debts. He didn't marry you for love. He married you because your father's estate provided the perfect bridge for his final exit. He was a bird in a cage, and you were the key." I felt like I'd been punched in the solar plexus. My father had passed away a year ago, leaving me a modest inheritance and a house in the suburbs that had been in our family for generations. To me, it was a memory. To Caleb, it was apparently a payday. "He traded you," Julian continued, finally looking at me. Those gray eyes were chilling. "He owed me a debt that he couldn't pay in cash. He dipped into funds he shouldn't have. Funds belonging to people who don't take kindly to clerical errors. He knew I was looking for someone, a companion for a very specific type of trip. He gave me the deed to your house. He gave me your power of attorney, which you so kindly signed in those prenup papers. And then he gave me you." "That's not legal," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This is human trafficking. You can't just own me." "Legality is a matter of perspective, Mia," Julian said, leaning back as the plane took off, the G-force pinning me to my seat. "On paper, you are traveling with a business associate. On paper, you've signed over your assets. By the time we land, Caleb Vance will have vanished into the ether with a new passport and a clean slate. And you will be my guest." The plane tilted, climbing higher into the night sky. I looked out the window at the lights of the city disappearing beneath the clouds. My life was down there. My friends, my home, my identity. All of it was shrinking until it was nothing but a speck of light. And then, it was gone. The flight felt like a fever dream. I tried to stay awake, thinking I could find a way to escape during a layover, but Julian had chosen a direct private charter route. We landed in a private airfield in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the Caribbean, based on the heat that hit me the second the door opened. But this wasn't the Maldives. The air felt heavy and humid, smelling of salt, jet fuel, and something sweet and rotting. Julian led me to a villa that sat on the edge of a jagged cliff, overlooking a dark, churning sea. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, and it was a cage. Every door had a biometric keypad. Every window was reinforced glass. I spent the first night locked in a bedroom that looked like a luxury catalog spread. White linens, fresh orchids, a view of the moon reflecting off the water, and a silence that felt like it was screaming. I didn't sleep. I paced the perimeter of the room like a trapped animal. I checked every drawer for a phone, a laptop, anything. But the room was stripped bare of technology. There was only a wardrobe full of expensive clothes in my size. Clothes Caleb must have told him I liked. That thought made me want to vomit. The next morning, the door clicked open. Julian was standing there holding a manila envelope. He looked rested, his suit perfectly pressed despite the tropical humidity. "I suppose you want to see the man you cried for," he said. He tossed the envelope onto the bed. I scrambled for it. My fingers were shaking so much I almost tore the photos inside. I expected to see Caleb tied up or in trouble. But these weren't photos of a victim. They were surveillance shots. High resolution, professional. There was Caleb. But his sandy hair was dyed jet black. He was standing at a beach bar in Rio de Janeiro, wearing a linen shirt I'd never seen. He was laughing, a drink in his hand. And his arm. His arm was draped around a woman I'd never seen before. A beautiful brunette who looked like she'd never had a care in her life. She was wearing a necklace that caught the sun. A string of pearls. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Those were my mother's heirloom pearls. The ones that had gone missing from my jewelry box a week before the wedding. He'd told me I must have misplaced them in the stress of planning. He hadn't just sold me. He'd robbed me of my memories before he even left. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. The sadness. The heartbreak. It started to curdle. It turned into something sharp, something hot. All the tears I'd been holding back suddenly dried up. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted to burn something down. He's happy, I whispered, staring at the photo of him laughing. Is rich, Julian corrected, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. He sold your life to buy his freedom. He thinks he's clever. He thinks he's the only predator in the jungle. He took a gamble that you were too weak to survive me, and that I was too busy to care about his little side hustles. I looked up at Julian, really looked at him. Why am I here? You didn't bring me here just to show me pictures of my ex-husband being a monster. You don't seem like the type of man who does anything out of the goodness of his heart. Julian smiled for the first time. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who just saw his investment start to pay off. Caleb made one mistake, Julian said, walking toward the window and looking out at the ocean. He thought I wanted a wife. I don't. I have no use for a domestic life. I wanted his access. He was a master at building back doors into financial systems. He has the codes to a certain offshore account. An account that whole is more money than you can fathom. It's money that belongs to me and several of my partners. He turned back to me, his gaze intense. He blocked me out the moment he vanished at the airport. He thought he could use the codes as leverage to keep me from coming after him. But he left a back door, a biometric signature that requires a spouse's authorization. He thought he was being smart, leaving you with me as a bargaining chip. He thought I'd keep you as a pet or a hostage until he felt like negotiating for your release. But you're not going to do that, I said, the realization hitting me. No, Julian said. I have no intention of negotiating with a thief. And I suspect you have no intention of being a victim anymore. Am I right, Mia? I looked at the photo of Caleb again, the man who had held me while I cried about my father, the man who had promised to protect me. He was a ghost, a lie. What do you want me to do? I asked. My voice sounded different. It was flatter, harder. I'm going to teach you how to hunt him, Julian said. I'm going to give you the resources to find him, the training to survive him, and the means to take back every cent he stole from you. And then, once we have what we need, I'm going to let you decide what happens to him. The next 6 months were a blur of sweat, adrenaline, and cold, hard calculations. Julian wasn't my captor anymore. He was my coach, my mentor, and my harshest critic. He turned my grief into a weapon. We stayed at the villa, but it wasn't a prison anymore. It was a training ground. Julian brought in specialists. I spent 8 hours a day in front of computer screens, learning how to track a digital footprint through 3 different countries without leaving a trace of my own. I learned how to move money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands and Singapore. I learned how to read a person's tells, how to know when they were lying, when they were scared, and when they were about to bolt. Then came the physical part. Julian didn't want me to be a world-class fighter, but he wanted me to be dangerous. And like Caleb expects you to cower, he'd tell me as I practiced escaping from zip ties in a dark room. He expects you to scream. Don't scream, just hit. I learned how to spot a tail in a crowded market. I learned how to use my appearance as a camouflage, how to blend into a high-end gala or a dive bar in a heartbeat. I stopped being Mia, the grieving bride. My skin got tan, my muscles got lean, and my heart turned into a piece of flint. Julian watched it all with a detached sort of pride. We didn't talk about our pasts. We didn't talk about the future. We only talked about the target. He's moved, Julian said one morning, dropping a new file on the breakfast table. He's bored of Rio. He's moved to a villa in the hills of Tuscany. He thinks he's safe now. He's started a new company, a consultancy for high net worth individuals. He's using your father's name, Mia. He's calling it Thorn Global. The heat in my stomach flared up again. He's using my father's name? His bold, Julian said. But bold men make mistakes. His started using a specific encrypted server for his clients. A server we can access, if we're on site. When do we leave? I asked. We don't, Julian said. You leave. I've done all I can. You have the skills. You have the motivation. I'll provide the transport and the tech. But the confrontation, that's yours. Italy in the autumn is beautiful. The air is crisp, the vineyards are turning gold, and the light has this soft amber quality. But I wasn't there for the scenery. I tracked him to a villa nestled in the hills outside of Siena. It was an old stone farmhouse that had been converted into a fortress of luxury. It had a long, winding driveway lined with cypress trees. I spent 3 days watching him from a distance, using high-powered binoculars. He was living the life. Fancy cars. A silver Ferrari sat in the driveway. Wine that cost $1,000 a bottle. I saw him sipping it on the terrace every evening. He looked older, more stressed, but he still had that same arrogant tilt to his head. He thought he was a ghost. He thought the girl he'd left at gate B12 was a ghost too. It was a Tuesday night when I made my move. A storm was rolling in over the hills, the thunder providing a perfect cover. I didn't need to pick the locks. I'd already hacked the security system from a laptop in my rental car. The cameras were on a loop. The gates opened with a silent command. I walked through his front door. He hadn't even locked it. Why would he? He was a king in his own castle. I found him in his study, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking out over the rain-slicked vineyards. The room smelled of old books and expensive tobacco. I stood in the doorway, wearing a black silk suit, my hair cut short and dyed dark, my eyes as cold as the storm outside. "Hello, Caleb," I said. My voice was steady, not a hint of a tremor. He froze. I watched the glass slip from his fingers. It shattered on the marble floor. Crash. The amber liquid splashing against his Italian leather shoes. The sound of his perfect world breaking into a million jagged pieces. He turned around slowly, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And for a second I saw the man I'd married. But then I saw the coward underneath. "Mia?" he gasped. How are you here? Julian, did he let you go?" "Julian didn't let me do anything, Caleb," I said, stepping into the room. The light from the desk lamp cast long shadows across the floor. "I'm here because I wanted to see the look on your face when you realized you weren't as smart as you thought you were." He tried to recover his composure, a fake smile flickering on his lips. "Mia, honey, listen to me. I was going to come for you. I swear. I had to get away. People were after me. I did it to protect you. I knew Julian would keep you safe until I could clear the air." "Stop," I said. The word was like a gunshot. Every word out of your mouth is a lie. "I saw the photos from Rio, Caleb. I saw the pearls. My mother's pearls. Was that to protect me too?" His face fell. The mask was gone. "Look, I can make it up to you. I've made so much money. We can go away, anywhere you want. I have millions in an offshore account." "No, you don't," I said. He blinked. "What?" "I spent the last 6 months learning how you think, Caleb. I learned your passwords, your habits, your back doors. While you were sipping wine on this terrace, I was inside your system. I accessed the Thorn Global servers an hour ago. Every cent you stole, every dollar of my inheritance. It's gone. It's been moved to a blind trust that you can't touch. You're broke, Caleb. You're worse than broke. You're a liability." He lunged for the desk drawer, reaching for the hidden compartment where I knew he kept a 9mm. But I was faster. I'd practiced this move 10,000 times in the humid heat of the Caribbean. I had the small, sleek pistol Julian had given me aimed right at his chest before his hand even touched the wood. "Don't," I whispered. "I'm not here to kill you, Caleb. Honestly, you're not worth the paperwork. And besides, killing you would be an act of passion. And I don't feel anything for you anymore." He began to shake, his knees buckling until he collapsed into his leather chair. "Mia, please, give me a chance. If the people Julian works with find out the money is gone, they'll kill me." "I know," I said, leaning over the desk, looking him right in those lying, beautiful eyes. "That's why I already called them. And the Italian authorities. And the FBI. You see, when I moved the money, I left a very clear trail. A trail that leads right to this villa, right to you." The sirens started in the distance, a low, wailing sound that echoed through the hills, getting louder with every heartbeat. "You traded me for a clean slate," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "But I traded you for a career. Julian and I, we're going to be very busy. There are a lot of men out there just like you, men who think they can use people as currency. We're going to find them all." I tucked the gun into my waistband and turned toward the door. The blue and red lights were already flashing against the stone walls of the hallway. "Mia!" he screamed, his voice breaking into a sob. "You can't just leave me." "I loved you." I paused at the threshold. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could finally see the road ahead of me, and for the first time, it wasn't blocked by his shadow. "Happy honeymoon, Caleb," I said. "Hope the view from the cell is worth it." I walked out of the villa just as the first police cars pulled into the driveway. I blended into the shadows of the cypress trees, a ghost in the night. Julian was waiting at the end of the road in a black SUV, the engine idling like a predator. I got in, closed the door, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't look at the rearview mirror once, because the past was just a story I used to tell. And the future was mine to write. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good twist. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the darkest corners of the human heart.